nasty track. Rewind, play it back, sing low, shake it loose, feel the bass, pump that nasty track. Rewind, play it back, sing low, shake it loose, feel the bass, pump that nasty track.
A Griffin's Curiosity and a Dragon's Free Meal, both fatal and non-fatal versions, by Zelku the Thick Hunter. Version 1. You know what they say about curiosity, it gets you swallowed whole. A Griffin's Curiosity and a Dragon's Free Meal, non-fatal. By Zelku the Thick Hunter. It was a normal afternoon at the School of Friendship. Pinkie Pie's class just ended, and recess was about to begin. Everyone goes outside to hang out and play with friends. Everyone but Gallus, who was waiting for Smolder outside an empty classroom that wasn't being used at the moment. As he waited for her to come, he thinks back to the conversation they had earlier that morning during Mrs. Fluttershy's class. 2 hours ago. Fluttershy was giving a lesson about snakes and other reptiles to the class. Everyone seemed really into the lesson, except for Gallus, who was a little bored at his desk. He looked shocked when he heard someone whisper his name, trying to get his attention. "Hey Gallus. Whoa, over here." He turned his head to the left, to see it was Smolder whispering to him from the desk next to him. Smolder had a book open up, to cover her face during the lesson in class. He opens up his book too, and they began a conversation, while Fluttershy was still giving the lesson to the rest of the class. "Hey, what up Smolder?" Gallus said. "Not much, just bored out of my mind listening to this lesson. I will rather be eating another snake than hearing a lesson about them," Smolder replied. "Yeah, I know what you mean. I'd rather we talk about something cooler like a..." "Wait. Say what now? You're saying you actually ate a snake before, like swallowing its whole and all?" Gallus said in shock. "Yeah. Real dragons swallow their prey whole. Only wimps need to chew." "No offense," she said with a pompous smile. "None taken," he says with a flat expression on his face. But, hearing that did pique his curiosity, and he decided to ask her a question. "Say, Smolder, have you ever tried eating something bigger than a snake? Say a griffin perhaps," he says, and Smolder gives him a confused look, before picking up what he was getting at. "Wait, Gallus. Are you asking me to eat you? I didn't think you were into that kind of thing. But everybody has their fetish, I suppose." He gives her a confused look before responding. "Okay, 1. I don't know what a fetish is, and 2. I'm not asking you to digest me or anything. I'm just curious to see what it feels like to be swallowed whole, that's all." Well, before Smolder could answer him, the bell signaling class once over rang. As everyone was getting ready to leave for their next class, Smolder remembers what Dragon Lord Ember told her. "Don't eat any of your classmates, Smolder. If you do, it's going to cause a lot of serious problems among the other species, especially if they found out you did it for some stupid reason. So, in other words, no matter what happens to you, remember, you're at the school to learn, not to eat other students, got it?" Ember was right. Smolder did come here to learn, and being curious about what a griffin tastes like is learning something, so she walks up to Gallus and says to him, "Okay, so one of the classrooms isn't being used, 'cause all the teachers are going to be having lunch together. So meet me there during recess, and we can do this, okay?" Gallus nods his head, and the two of them go off to their next class. Present time. Smolder comes down the hallway, spinning a key in one of her claws. "You sure took your time getting here, Smolder. I could have been seen by one of the teachers by now, you know." "Oh, don't get your feathers in a twist, Gallus. I had to wait for Spike to leave before I could get the key. Now, come on and let's do this thing already." Smolder opens the door to the class, and Gallus walks inside behind Smolder and closes the door behind him. "So, head first or feet first?" "Head first." "Alright, let's do this thing then," she says with a predatory hunger in her eyes and a low growl from her stomach. "Bah. Smolder, you did eat at lunch today, right?" Gallus asks with a somewhat worried look on his face. "Well, I had a choice to make, either eat my lunch, and not have enough room for you to fit inside my stomach, or skip lunch, so you didn't have to land in a pile of my partially digested food. Which option would you rather I have made?" she replies. "Good point. Okay, let's just..." Before Gallus could finish his sentence, Smolder had quickly opened her maw and slightly bit down over his head. "Hey, give me some warning before you do that, Smolder. His words were muffled by his head being in Smolder's mouth. You were taking too long. Now stop your whining, and just get in my gut already. Her words were muffled by Gallus' head still being in her mouth. And with that Smolder began to pull Gallus further and further into her hungry maw. All the while, Gallus was experiencing the feeling of being swallowed whole by another creature, and one of his friends no less. Slowly passing through each ring one at a time, feeling each one squeeze around his body and the moisture of the throat walls around him, inching closer and closer to her winking stomach hole and his inevitable destination of Smolder's stomach. You know, this actually feels kind of nice. Maybe I should ask Smolder to do this more often. Smolder, while enjoying his taste, was starting to get a little impatient, so she tilted her head back, to have gravity speed things up. But even with the sudden shift, Gallus was still enjoying himself. Bit by bit, Smolder continuously moaning at how good Gallus tastes, all the while he's enjoying it, until all that's left is Gallus' back tail, happily wagging about, and she slurps it down like a spaghetti noodle. Then she leans up against the wall, while lightly patting and admiring her new bloated belly, and lets out a small belch. Burp. You know something, you're actually pretty tasty, Gallus. I wish you would have asked me to do this sooner. We definitely have to do this more often. Yeah, I can see this becoming a thing we do more, Gallus says happily from inside her stomach. Smolder then lets out a large yawn. Well, I'm going to take a nap now. I'll let you out once recess is over, okay? Yawn. Yeah, fine by me. I'm getting sleepy in here anyway. I'll see you when I wake up, Smolder. And with that, Smolder puts her hands behind her head, lays down on the floor, closes her eyes and slowly drifting off to sleep with only the sound of her stomach groaning and gurgling filling the room. A few minutes later, Spike and Ember walked down the hallway to an empty classroom for some alone time together. Around the time Spike and Ember were getting to know each other, Spike took a trip to the Dragonlance. He had learned of particular activity dragons tend to do together. Apparently, a lot of dragons have a Vore fetish and Spike was no exception to this. He saw Ember eating one of the other dragons. They had to sacrifice themselves as a tribute to the Dragon Lord, and upon seeing this, he became immediately aroused by the sight of it. Watching another living being squirm inside her stomach, the gurgles and groaning sound it made, and that big squirming round belly in front of him, she looked so damn sexy. Needless to say, he tried it for himself, and the two of them secretly started dating. Now, whenever Spike finds out that Ember is coming to town, they get together to have some nice boring fun. Ember and Spike. I'm sorry it took so long to find the spare key to the classroom, Ember. Could have sworn I left the original one in the lockbox earlier today, Spike says as the two continue their walk. Don't worry about it, Spike. We've still got some time before you have to get back to work, and I have to meet with Twilight. She turned around to look at Spike placing her bag on the floor, and placed her hand behind Spike's head, and brings it closer to her stomach. Besides, I skipped lunch today, so the longer I have to wait for the more excited my stomach gets at the prospect of getting to digest you. Spike listened closely to Ember's stomach as it growled in anticipation of its coming meal. Spike was getting excited as well, and dashed down to the classroom leaving a smoke trail of himself that even Rainbow Dash would be impressed by. As the two of them reached the classroom, Ember had a feeling that something wasn't quite right. Hey, Spike, do you hear something? Ember says as they both reach the door. Actually, now that you mention it, sounds like someone is digesting somebody, and snoring really loudly, and it's coming from the classroom. Ember looks inside the classroom and what she saw filled her with worry and anger at the same time. For the love of the Draco Meteor, move aside, Spike. Before Spike could ask what for, Ember had already kicked the door in and angrily marched inside to the classroom. Spike looks to the door before his eyes turn to see what got Ember so steamed in the first place. Smolder was lying on the floor sleeping, with a huge distended belly and loudly snoring. I should have known this was going to happen. Just couldn't help yourself, could you, Smolder? Spike, pass me my bag, will you? All right. Spike picks up Ember's bag and brings it over to her. So who do you think is in there, Ember? He asks with a somewhat concerned look on his face. One way to find out, Spike, and this is going to help us do it, she says as she pulls out a bottle of green liquid from her bag and opens it, pouring some of it down Smolder's throat. Okay, move back, Spike. They both began to move away from the sleeping Smolder in preparation for what's about to happen. Smolder and Gallus. Smolder wakes up with the weird taste in her mouth. Why does my mouth taste slicko? Her stomach suddenly felt strange and let out a series of loud and violent growls and started inflating, waking up Gallus in the process. The next thing she knew, her stomach inflates to nearly double its size, and she lets out a huge burp, causing Gallus to come back up covered in the same green liquid from before, and Smolder's stomach deflates, returning to its normal shape. Gross, what is this stuff? Gallus says, getting himself up from the floor, and wiping off the green stuff his body was covered in. That green stuff just saved you from being digested, kid. The two of them turn their heads around, to see an angry-looking Ember glaring down at the both of them, and a relieved-looking Spike behind her. We can explain, they both say in unison. Pleased you. So the two of them explain what had transpired before Spike and Ember came into the room, and what led to all this happening. Alright, I see what's going on now, but that still doesn't excuse what you two did. Do you know what would have happened if we didn't show up here? I was going to spit him back up after recess, honest, Smolder says, holding up her hands to show she was being honest. And how long do you think it takes for a dragon to digest a meal? Yeah, Ember says back to Smolder. About an hour, Smolder answers back to Ember. Exactly, and another thing. Before Ember could finish her sentence, two huge rumbles came from nowhere in the classroom, causing Spike and Gallus to wobble until they both fell on their backs. The two then got up to see Ember, and Smolder blushing hard. I'm starving, I feel like I'm going to die of hunger, Smolder says, clutching her stomach. That's a side effect of the potion I gave you earlier. And it doesn't help that I skip lunch today, Ember says, placing a hand over her own growling gut. Same here, Smolder replies. Ember looks over at Spike and Gallus and notices the slight tinge of blush on both their faces. And this gives her an idea. You know what, I have a solution to our problem here. She looks inside her bag again, and pulls out the other potion, this time a blue one, and tosses it over to Gallus. He catches it in his talons, and she hands a teal one over to Smolder. Alright, you two drink up. The two of them opened the bottles, and began to drink. Once they finish, Smolder looks to Ember and asks, so what do we do now? Ember looks over to Spike, and Gallus licking her lips and says, now eat. Smolder gets the hint and looks over to Gallus, who looks over to her, and he sees the same predatory hunger in her eyes from earlier, then looks at Ember, who has the same look on her face, and they are both slightly drooling with their stomachs growling louder than before. Spike, should we be worried about those two? He asks, looking over to Spike, and only sees a huge grin on his face, then looks back at the two hungry dragons in front of them. Oh. Horse apples. A few minutes later, Smolder and Ember lay on the classroom floor, smiling happily as their stomachs fully satisfied now, and gurgling and digesting their respected meals each. Smolder looks over to Ember and asks, so that potion you gave to Gallus will make it too, so he reforms in the last place he woke up at, right? Yep. He'll be just fine when he wakes up, brop, haha, Ember says, placing a hand on her stomach, causing it to gurgle by her touch. And, brop, what about Spike? You didn't give him one, Smolder says questioningly as she propped herself up from the floor. Ember picks herself up from the floor and answers, Spike is a Vore dragon, so he'll reform on his own. Vore dragon? Smolder asked, puzzled, not knowing what a Vore dragon is. A Vore dragon is a special breed of dragons that are born with the ability to reform themselves after being eaten alive, a reform in the last place they woke up at, and they're a very rare breed of dragon. The best part is they taste like your favorite food depending on who eats them, of course. Wow, sounds pretty cool. Do you mind if I give Spike a taste sometime? Slow it down, Smolder, I haven't finished telling you the whole story yet. Yeah, they taste really good, but much like any tasty thing, they always go straight to the hips and thighs. I'm a prime example of this. She gestures down to her ample thighs and hips to prove her point. And you're going to have your own problems once you finish digesting that Griffin kid. Gallus, you said his name once. What do you mean by that, Dragon Lord Ember? Smolder asked with a worried look on her face. Griffins aren't as fattening as Vore dragons are. But that potion I gave you will make sure to add on a few extra pounds after he finishes digesting. Consider that your punishment for disregarding my warning. Oh, that's a dirty move, Ember. That's Dragon Lord Ember to you, young lady. Yeah, fine, but shouldn't we have moved to somewhere different? I mean, what if someone else comes in here while we were just sitting here talking? Oh, it's a little late for that, I'm afraid, Smolder. The two dragons freeze in place and slowly turn around to see standing behind them is a somewhat angry Twilight and the rest of her friends staring at them with a mixture of confusion, shock, and humor. In the case of Pinkie Pie and Rainbow Dash, we can explain, the two dragons said in unison. Pleased you. The end. Aftermath. 1 hour after being eaten, Gallus slowly wakes up inside his bed after the day's previous events from an hour ago. Get out of bed, and walk over to the mirror in his room to check his reflection. So I actually got eaten by a dragon. The best day of my life so far, I'll say that much. Wait until the guys back home hear about this. He then decides to hop into the shower for a bit, as to not smell too much like he just accomplished one of his life goals. After he gets out of the shower, there's someone knocking at his door. He goes to open it, and finds Miss Rainbow Dash and Smolder both standing at the door. Miss Dash is wearing her coach's hat and whistle around her neck, and Smolder seems to have gained some weight specifically around her hips and thighs, and also appears to be a bit taller. Hi Miss Dash. Hey Smolder, what's up? What's up kiddo? Is that for the next month, you two are going to be spending a lot of time with me after school and at recess, helping Smolder work off all this weight you put on her? Miss Dash responds. Not all of it's going to come off me. Ember made sure of that with the potion she gave me, Smolder says, crossing her arms, and looking down at her thighs and hips. Well, that's Zikor's potions for you. She can come up with a potion for just about anything. Okay, enough talking you two, it's time to get moving. As the three of them began to walk, Gallus was admiring his handiwork on Smolder's hips, and said to her, Smolder, if you ask me, you look really good with my meat on your bones. Some creatures like their girls, like they like their gravy, nice and thick. The two of them stopped still in their tracks as he continued walking, and looked back at them. What? Miss Applejack is always telling us to be honest, so I'm just being honest. As he turns around, and continues walking, Rainbow Dash and Smolder just stared, and looked to each other. Smolder just shrugged and said, you know, he's right, I actually like my new look. If it's all the same with you, I think we'll just go to the detention hall for the next month instead. See ya there Miss Dash. Smolder says and follows after Gallus to detention, leaving Rainbow Dash hovering in the hallway while the gape at what she just saw and heard. Kids these days. Where do they learn this stuff? Version 2, The Dragon's Greed. Curiosity gets the Griffin swallowed by the dragon. Fatal version. By Zelku the Thick Hunter. It was a normal afternoon at the School of Friendship. Pinkie Pie's class just ended, and recess was about to begin. Everyone goes outside to hang out, and play with friends. Everyone but Gallus, who was waiting for Smolder outside an empty classroom, that wasn't being used at the moment. As he waited for her to come, he thinks back to the conversation they had earlier that morning during Mrs. Fluttershy's class that day. 2 hours ago. Fluttershy was giving a lesson about snakes and other reptiles to the class. Everyone seemed really into the lesson, except for Gallus, who was a little bored at his desk. When suddenly he heard someone whispers his name, trying to get his attention. Hey Gallus. Whoa, over here. He turned his head to the left, to see it was Smolder whispering to him from the desk next to him. With a book open up, to cover her face during the lesson in class. He opens up his book too, and they began a conversation, while Fluttershy was still giving the lesson to the rest of the class. Hey, what up Smolder? He says, leaning over to hear what she says better. Not much, just bored out of my mind listening to this lesson. Like there's stuff I don't know about snakes. Here's what I can tell you about snakes: they taste very good, especially when you swallow them whole, she says, rubbing at her stomach, licking her lips at the memory. Yeah, I know what you mean. I rather we are talking about something cooler like a... Wait. Say what now? You're saying you actually ate a snake before, like swallowing its whole and all? Gallus says, moving his desk a little closer to Smolder's without the teacher knowing. Yeah. Real predators swallow their prey whole, only wimps need to chew. She looks over at Gallus. No offense. None took. He says with a flat look on his face. But hearing that did pique his curiosity, and he decided to ask her a question. Say, Smolder, have you ever tried eating something bigger than a snake? Smolder puts a claw to her chin, and begins to think. I've eaten a raccoon before that's bigger than a snake, and I'm also eating a bunch of other smaller creatures like rabbits, mice, chickens. Why? She asked. Do you think you could swallow something bigger than that? Say a griffin perhaps, he says, looking at Smolder with a small smile on his face. Smolder gives him a confused look, before picking up what he was getting at. Wait, Gallus. Are you asking me to eat you? I didn't think you were into that kind of thing. But everybody has their fetish, I suppose. He gives her a confused look before responding. Okay, 1. I don't know what a fetish is, and 2. I'm not asking you to digest me or anything. I'm just curious to see what it feels like to be swallowed whole, that's all. Well. Before Smolder could answer him, the bell signaling class once over rang. As everyone was getting ready to leave for their next class, Smolder remembers what Dragon Lord Ember told her. Don't eat any of your classmates, Smolder. If you do, it's going to cause a lot of serious problems among the other species, especially if they found out you did it for some stupid reason. So, no matter what happens to you, remember, you're at the school to learn, not to eat other students. Got it? Ember was right. Smolder did come here to learn, and being curious about what a griffin tastes like is learning something. She also thought about what her brother would say in something like this. If he wants to know what it feels like to be in a powerful predator's stomach, I say let him, and if he just happens to get digested while he's in there, oh well. She walks up to Gallus, and says to him, okay, one of the classrooms isn't being used, all the teachers are going to be having lunch together. So meet me there during recess, and we can do this, okay? Gallus nods his head and the two of them go off to their next class. Present time. Smolder comes down the hallway, spinning a key in one of her claws. You sure took your time getting here, Smolder. I could have been seen by one of the teachers by now, you know, Gallus says to Smolder. Oh, don't get your feathers in it, Whist, Gallus. I had to wait for Spike to leave before I could get the key. Now, come on and let's do this thing already. Smolder opens the door to the class and Gallus walks inside behind Smolder and closes the door behind him. So, head first or feet first? Smolder asks. Head first. Gallus answers. Alright, let's do this thing then, she says with a predatory hunger in her eyes and a low growl from her stomach. Bah. Smolder, you did eat at lunch today, right? Gallus asks with a somewhat worried look on his face. Well, I had a choice to make, either eat my lunch, and not have enough room for you to fit inside my stomach, or skip lunch, so you didn't have to land in a pile of my partially digested food. Which option would you rather I have made? She answers back as she was closing all the blinds and the windows to make sure no one from outside could see them. Yeah, okay, you have a good point there. Alright then, let's do this, Gallus says as he proceeded to walk up to Smolder. She puts her claw up in front of him, stopping him in his tracks. Hold up there, lunch. I got to take a few things before we get started, Smolder says, walking over to the desk in front of the class and pulling open the bottom drawer, taking out a few vials of liquid. Smolder, what are those exactly? Gallus asked with clear confusion on his face. Well, here's the thing, once I swallow you, I can't exactly spit you back up, so these potions are to make sure that things go a lot smoother for you. She then points to one of the potions she placed on the table. This first one is a reformation potion. This way any living creature that I swallow whole movie form in the last place they woke up at within a few hours after completing digestion. The second potion is to speed up the digestion, so this way you don't stay in my stomach for too long, and I can get back to having my recess faster. And the third potion is to ensure that once you're in my stomach you'll quickly drift off to sleep within 30 seconds, and it also makes sure that you don't feel any pain while you're being digested. Gallus sits on his back legs listening to Smolder explain what each potion does. Wow, I've really got to hand it to you, Smolder. I'm impressed you really came up with everything for this, Gallus says as he looks over the 3 vials in front of him. Well, of course, I did. I want to make sure that my friend is safe through this whole crazy experience. Her stomach begins to growl again, louder than before. She places her claws over it to silence it. She looks back to Gallus, a small blush coming across her face. Well, I guess we should probably get this out of the way. Then you go ahead and drink the potions and I'll just be over here. Yeah, sure, no problem. She then proceeded to pop the cork of one of the potions, hiding a devilish smile on her face. Little did Gallus actually know only 2 out of the 3 potions did as she said. The second potion did make the digestion faster, and the third potion was to make sure he didn't feel any pain. But the first potion was actually meant to enhance the taste of whoever she ate. And the effect of each potion was meant to last a whole hour, giving her more than enough time to not only devour him, but the rest of her classmates as well. It's a good thing that one of the classes they had before recess was potion crafting with Ms. Zakora, and she left her book unattended for a while. Otherwise, she wouldn't have known how to make any of these potions. She proceeded to drink all 3 potions one at a time, and once you have finished the last one, she placed all the vials back into the drawer and then closed it. Alright then, you're ready to do this? Smolder says, standing ready. Well, yeah, you know that I. Before Gallus could finish his sentence, Smolder had quickly opened her maw and slightly bit down over his head. His body was a little tense at first, but then began to relax once he realized what was happening, allowing Smolder to devour him rather easily. The taste enhancement potion was doing its job, as Gallus tasted even better than she could have imagined, working him and quickly enjoying his taste, all the while moving from his shoulders to the midsection, leaving his hind legs left out. Before long he was completely in her stomach, slurping up the last bit of his tail, as if it was a pasta noodle, and letting out a belch afterward. Smoother than plopped yourself onto the floor, placing one club behind her to keep herself up, while the other one slowly rubbed her newly big engorged belly. Burp. Oh, by the dragon gods, you are absolutely delicious, Gallus. That taste enhancement potion really did come in handy. I hope the others taste just as well as you do, maybe even better. Oh well, thank you, I always knew I. Wait, what did you just say? To be perfectly honest with you, after we had our conversation in class, I got to thinking, what does Sandbar taste like? And Yona, and Acellus, and Silverstream. Why, tasty just you, when I can find out what all of our friends taste like. As I looked at our friends during lunch, while everyone else was eating, I felt the strong urge to just want to gobble all of you up right then and there, but I had to restrain myself for just the right time. Smolder said with a gleamful look in her eyes as her mouth began to water, and her stomach rumbled with Gallus inside. Whoa, hold up, Smolder, can't do that. The teachers are going to find out in here. Gallus tries to protest, but soon feels his eyelids getting heavy and finds it hard to continue to speak. It looks like the sleeping part of the potion is starting to kick in. Don't worry, you won't be in there alone for too long. The others will be joining you real soon, she says, slowly rubbing her stomach as he soon falls off to sleep. Not too long after Gallus falls asleep, Smolder's stomach begins to growl loudly and quickly begins to shrink in size, returning to its normal flat surface. 1 down, 5 to go now. Who's next on the list? She says that she begins to walk over to the window overlooking the rest of her classmates playing outside on the playground with a predatory gleam in her eye and a devious smile on her face. One by one, Smolder shook upon each one of her classmates, gobbled them down, slurping up their tails and quickly digesting them. By the time recess was over, all of her friends were already completely digested in her belly. She then proceeded to make her way to her next class, when she ran into Principal Twilight with a concerned look on her face. Oh, Smolder, there you are. Have you seen the others? Nobody's seen them since recess ended, and I'm a bit concerned, she says with a concerned look on her face. Smolder places a claw to her chin, and begins to think. Nope, sorry, Hedmer, Twilight hasn't seen any of them, but if I do, you'll be the first to know, she says with a big smile on her face. Okay then, Smolder, thank you. Why, you should get going, you don't want to be late for class. Smolder gives a mock salute before heading off in the opposite direction from Twilight to class. She doesn't get too far before her stomach starts growling loudly, and lets out a loud burp, catching the attention of Twilight. Must have been something I ate. Her stomach begins to growl louder than it before as she grips it, trying to silence it. Getting this weird feeling spreading across it before her stomach begins to enlarge in size, making it look like Smolder had swallowed a beanbag shares. Twilight then walked up in front of Smolder. Smolder, you are right, what just happened? She said, confused at what she just saw. Look, Miss Twilight, I can prop. A mixture of feathers, fur, hair, and spit flies out of Smolder's mouth as she burped, landing on Twilight's face. Twilight then opened her eyes, looking at Smolder with a very disappointing and angry glare. Her mane began to sizzle. Good news, Miss Twilight, I know where the others are, she said with a sheepish smile on her face.
That's all, Zipsters! Like and subscribe.